Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. Hopefully you can see me and see the slides. If not, I've got a phone with the chat on it, and I'll try to keep my eye on it. My name is Jay Dreyer. I'm a lead engineer at Target Corporation. Hopefully Target is
Okay, let's get started.
Oh.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Hopefully you can see me.
So I had my volume on there. Sorry about that. Anyways, so I work at Target, which is hopefully your favorite big box retailer of choice. I've been working on the API platform at Target for the last 8 or so years. I've been there for 14 total, so been there a while. Okay. All right, so what we're going to cover today, I've talked to some people that are at the very beginning of the so-called API journey, and I always think that everybody kind of knows all this stuff, but it turns out that is not the case. So when the note for this this conference came out, I took a shot and submitted a talk, and here we are. But I've always kind of found it interesting how we've gone from 0 API specs to 1,200. So hopefully some of the information that we talk about will be useful to you at your companies. But the topics are, I'll give a quick history of APIs at Target, and then right off the bat, some of the problems that we immediately ran into. And then we'll kind of talk about how we fixed it and how we managed it going forward, kind of our processes. And nothing is perfect, so there are still challenges that we face today, which from listening to the conference talks that I've attended so far, there may be the answers to those tomorrow, so it's pretty neat. Okay, so APIs at Target. So if you go back to 2012, the iPhone is insanely popular. Everybody's got one just about, and they want to shop on it. Target likes to sell things to people who like to shop. So we've got the iOS app, there's an Android app, there is the mobile web, and there is Target.com. But back in 2012, there was no common way to get all of the data needed back and forth easily to these phones and devices. So the different digital teams and technical teams got together and decided we need one way to do this. We need an API platform. We need to find a better way to do what we're doing. So we did some research and ended up going with Apigee, who is now owned by Google or Alphabet, or however you want to say it. And they gave us not only the API gateway, but key management, reporting, a developer portal, all of that. So we implemented that over the next year. The way that we set things up initially is that we kind of built the APIs with Apigee. So a team from, say, the iOS app group would have a product API. And they would give us some kind of a specification that we would then turn around and work with Apigee to get deployed on the gateway. But as we kept adding these, we did not have a very good process in place. And if you've ever attended one of Ken Lane's talks, it was the bad example of here's a PDF, or here's a Google Doc, or here's a Word doc. We had specs everywhere, and it was kind of a nightmare. Also, in order to get those specs, we have a developer portal that was given to us through our Apigee contract, and it's in Drupal, and that was what I was in charge of. And if you're familiar with Drupal, you really need to be all in with Drupal to fully take advantage of what it can offer, which isn't something that you just pick up a Drupal for Dummies book and start rolling with. Not to mention, at the time, a lot of it was controlled by Apigee, so we had to work through them to get things updated. So bottom line, the specs were not up to date in our developer portal. So there's a constant battle to keep trying to go back and find a spec, talk to the owner, update Drupal, so on and so forth. So in 2014, we decided this isn't sustainable. There's got to be a better way. And so what we did, is we created our own platform. And we kind of ended the Apogee relationship. By this point, we've been doing it a couple of years. We understand how things work. And Target became much more of a developer-centric company than it was in the past. So the feeling on the team was that we could do a lot of this stuff ourselves. So we did, and we built what's called Node Proxy, which is our gateway. Created our own homegrown developer portal, which at the time was Angular. And we made the ultimate decision that everything is going to be documented in a Swagger spec. And I can still call it Swagger because that's what it was called then when we did it. So any API that wanted to be in our system had to have a spec or it wouldn't show up and you couldn't go on the gateway. Also, as part of the portal, we integrated Swagger UI and the Swagger editor into that. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a bit. And this is why I find this conference so fascinating, because the talks I've attended, everybody's talked about pieces that I'm going to be talking about now. So it's pretty neat. In fact, one of the last talks I went to was this whole concept of the X definition sections that you can add into your spec. And so we decided if we were going to have everybody create a spec, there was a lot more information that we needed to gather from them than just the basic, here are the endpoints, here are the resources. So you can see things like personnel in here. Who's the owner? Who do we talk to if something breaks? What's the life cycle status? Is it in prod? Is it retired? Is it still being built? How long has it been out there? There's all sorts of information that we track about every API that gets onboarded. And all of these things just helped us to have a much better understanding of, what exists at Target. And as I mentioned earlier, we made the decision that every API that wanted to be onboarded has to have a Swagger spec. There was no, you couldn't just say, oh, well, we'll skip it and do it later. You had to come up with this to get out there. Okay, the next part that we found that we had to do was we had to implement some standards. Initially, we let teams do whatever they wanted to do. And what we found was that it became almost impossible for us to help support teams because just the way they were doing things was so different from API to API. So we created standards, and I'll say that, I don't think that our standards necessarily are the end-all be-all, but they are standards, and they're things that everybody at Target follows, and that leads to consistency across APIs. At Target, it's pretty easy to move around from team to team, and having the APIs be similar structure, I think it just helps with consistency and makes things run a little bit better. So some of the things that we decided on, everything was in snake case, no camel case. All of your responses, all of your parameter names, resource names, all snake case. And the great example about this, because you can make the argument of camel case. I made the argument of snake case, and one of the reasons was when we started with things and we would try to support teams, we're like, what did you call the key? And they're like, API key. And we go, okay, well, is it, how did you spell it? And there were so many different ways that you could do it. So what we ended up coming up with was it's just key. It's all lowercase, K-E-Y. Every endpoint has to have that key param. And so just having those things eliminates these kind of common problems you'll get if you just leave it wide open for everyone. Other fun standards we have, everything is a plural noun, API names and endpoints. And one of the things that I kind of like about that is teams tend to want to name their APIs after their system, which tends to have some kind of interesting code name, which at Target usually starts with red. But what happens is teams change, the marketing terms change, but what doesn't change is fundamentally what is being served. And so, we'll get to the review part coming up, but we try to make sure that the name of the API actually matches the resources that are being returned and not some code name that won't make any sense in a few years. We try to follow standard RESTful best practices, which was kind of discussed earlier that maybe there isn't a core set, but we do things like, no verbs and endpoint names. So we don't do get underscore user. There's the get HTTP method, and then there's users. If you want to get a specific one, get users/user ID. Everything is in JSON. We do have a few that are XML, but for the most part, JSON is the standard. We use standard HTTP response codes and error codes. The key is required. And then there are a whole bunch more. We have documented in our internal documentation sites, all of the standards. I've got my chat thing over here. Yes. Stephen, that is an excellent question. Let's talk about that. So Stephen's question, you can see there is governance. And that's what we're getting to right now. So what we found is that you can have all these standards, but you've got to have some way to enforce them. And what we decided, as I mentioned multiple times, every API has to go through an onboarding process. If you want to be a part of the gateway, which has been mandated as mandatory by our CIO, everybody has to use our gateway, then you have to go through our onboarding process. And that includes a formal review of the OpenAPI spec, which is one of the fun jobs that I get to do. The process that we have for onboarding an API looks like this. So the first step is intake. There's an intake issue form in our GitHub repo. You fill that out, submit it, and then we start trading documentation back and forth about, with links, what to do next and all that. At that point, the development team has to create the OpenAPI spec. And once they do that, they set up 30 minutes with myself and we review it. And what I'm looking for is are all the standards followed? API names, the resource names, parameter names, the responses, error codes, the target-specific XAPI definition data. And you're probably sitting there going, this sounds like the worst job in the world. It's not the worst job in the world, but it is very, could be nitpicky. And there's a piece that we created that I'll talk about next that has helped reduce my workload with that. Let me see real quick here. David asked a question about socializing your OpenAPI standards. So as part of the onboarding process, we have a comment that gets added to the ticket that says, make sure that you follow all the API design standards that are found here, and there's a link to it. It's on our internal doc site. And we also do a couple presentations every year throughout Target to both our Target India partners and the people in the US for anybody that's interested in kind of learning more details about API design. Marco has a question, how do you make sure all APIs are consistent? Yeah, so it's the review. The review is how we try to make them all consistent. Like I said, it's 30 minutes. It rarely takes that long. And once teams have been through it once or twice, they know what, specifically what we get into looking for. And every once in a while, I'll get one that there's no changes, good to go. Let's merge it and get it in the portal. Yep, Adam, that's coming up next. Asking about, this sounds like a manual process. It very much was, but let me get back to this. So the spec is reviewed. If it's approved or there are changes that need to be made, the development team will make the changes and then create a PR against what we call our API specs repo. If it passes, this next thing that I'll tell you about, it gets uploaded to the developer portal and then it shows up in our docs site. And at that point, they can expose their API in stage, they validate there, and then they go to prod. The question was brought up, again, this sounds awful. That's a lot of manual review. I'm sure you miss a bunch of things. Yes, so we had a team, the team that we're on created this tool called Spec Vet. And what it is, anytime that somebody makes a pull request against our repo, the API specs repo, that spec gets validated against it. And we have a whole bunch of regex rules and things that are evaluated. And if you can see here is this API that had a PR, and right off the bat, they get some critical errors. And all of these have specific rules. They can click the link and see what went wrong with that spec or what's missing. And then there are also, there's two levels of errors. There are critical and there are warnings. Critical has to be fixed or the spec can't be uploaded. Warnings probably should be fixed. Every once in a while we have a couple that can't, or they're kind of tricky. But this has helped reduce my workload a lot as far as the manual reviews go. So it lets me focus on fewer things that I find more critical, and it takes away a lot of the kind of ticky-tack errors and things. One example is somebody has added an auth header, but there's no 401 error response. That's something that comes up. They didn't put in a key. They're missing the XAPI definition, some field like all of these are here. So, okay, yeah, so the update process, let me jump back a slide. So I've got this loop here. Once it's been onboarded, if they've got a change that needs to be done, they can either just do a pull request, or we've built in an automated tool through our CI program that triggers it automatically. So when they make a change and they save it, it'll run and get updated in our system. I'll get a PR, and then we just review it and make sure that everything went okay. So breaking changes, no. So any change can be made that adds to the API. If you make any change that is going to be considered breaking change, so say you make a parameter required and before it wasn't, or say you change the name of an already existing resource, that requires a new version, which requires a new spec and a new review. So, but we do allow updates. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that I'm caught up. Spec Vet is not open source yet, but I believe there is talk to do that because we've expanded on what Spec Vet does, because we have other types of information like this that get reviewed. That we're trying to do a lot of no-touch work at Target, where you can just get to work and do your things, and the systems will tell you if you did it right or wrong instead of having a person there all the time. What frameworks, languages are teams using to build these APIs? So Java, Go are the two biggest languages, especially Java. And there are teams. There's another team that has built some automated generation tools to help create these specs. So one of the problems that we've had with Spec Vet is there's still some, maybe there's part of it I don't want to give up, but I still worry about the naming of things. It's probably the biggest reason. I haven't quite figured out how to get the computer to make sure that names are all right. So the API names and the resource names. So it's a balance. There's always debate, like how much time do we really want to spend on all this? But then I remind them how it used to be, and they're like, okay, we'll just keep going with that. Yes, they're using Git hooks. So on the pull request, it gets reviewed. And the Spec Vet tool here was built with Go. Yeah. So yeah, Anurag, I hope I said your name right. Yeah, let me go back here. So there's Spec Vet. Anurag, I'll get to your question in a bit. And yes, Robert, if there's a breaking change, they create a V2 of their spec. So they'll create a new thing. So this is our developer portal, and I'm gonna live on the edge here and see if I can share it without bringing down this whole talk. If you can see my Chrome. Okay, can people? Could people see the developer portal here? Am I sharing the right thing? I think there's a delay. All right, Santiago says you can see the developer portal. Okay, so just to show you some things, here is our API specs repo, and every API spec ends up in here. And one of the things that we've added is you have your spec, which looks like this, but we've also added the ability that you can create this overview.md markdown file. And you can add in all sorts of extra information if you want. If you want to add to the documentation. So back to here, this is the portal, and you can get your keys. Our whole catalog of every single API is listed here, and then you can click on the link. And this is where we're using the Swagger UI. There's a Swagger UI React component, and we've kind of modified it. So a lot of this stuff up here is from our XAPI definition, and the same goes with down here. These are all things in the XAPI definition section. But you can see how you can get to like the team's GitHub repo if you want to look at like the code behind the API. We've got some other, you can go directly to their Slack support room if you have questions. And then this part in here, this overview, this came from that overview.md file. So like I said, if you have additional documentation that you don't know how to get into here, you just create a markdown file and you can add whatever you want. And then here is your typical Swagger UI. Here's the documentation for all these resources. This is how it works. And like I said, there are roughly 1,200 APIs in here. So it kind of goes on and on and on. Okay, this is the real tricky part. Okay, and now's the part where I have to wait. Are we back in the presentation now? Well, I'm waiting to hear the answer to that. The portal now is written in React, or it's JavaScript using the React framework. Target has created a really neat kind of starting UI React app that makes it easy to build things quickly. So we've piggybacked on that. And our portal is open to all Target employees, and then employees can invite external users. So we do not have an open API platform. People can't just come in and start getting product data. Okay, so I'm wrapping up here. I don't really know how much time. Oh, I've still got like 5 minutes. Okay. I was worried I wasn't going to have enough to talk about, but evidently I do. So this is my nothing is perfect slide. There are still challenges, and the big one is there's no guarantee on accuracy. So you can give me a spec and I will review it and I will tell you if your spec is good or not. But there's no guarantee that the team actually goes back and changes the code so that things work the way the spec says. And that's something that we're looking to do, maybe as part of like the Java build process. I know there are teams that have created their own things, but it's a problem that we run into. There's no way for me to force teams to update their specs. So, say the team goes through the process, API is live, and then they decided to add another resource, but they didn't bother to update the spec for it. I don't really have a good way to know that. Third thing here, creating specs is still mostly manual. Like I said, there are teams that have found tooling, especially around Java, that makes it pretty easy. There's been a group at Target that has taken all of our XAPI definition stuff and added that in there. So there is work being done on that. And there was a team that, as part of their build process, all the tests have to pass, including every test against their spec. And if it doesn't, they can't build. So those people are my heroes. So integrating Spec Vet with Swagger Editor is difficult. Oh, I forgot to show you that. I still got time. I use Swagger Spec, Swagger Editor, sorry, to do my API reviews. And so, go back here, Chrome. In here, so this is where we use Swagger Editor. And again, it's kind of a modified version of the normal Swagger Editor that you download. But in here, you can, as it's in there, it'll live update and tell you if there are any errors or warnings. So right now it's telling me this because this is an external API and therefore it needs a penetration test done. So but this is how we use Swagger Editor. But I am not a React guru, and I'm having a hard time getting the latest version of Swagger Editor updated in here. So I know WebRun is around here somewhere, and I'm hoping you can help me. All right, let me go back here. There we go. Okay, and then a question was asked earlier, what happens if specs are already in production? We have run into that quite a bit, especially because we Target purchased Shipped. Shipped has their own APIs. They didn't build them using Target standards because they weren't part of Target back then. So I give exceptions, and the agreement is that when they go to a V2, then they'll follow the standards that way. We've got some other older APIs that we're trying to get on the gateway, and it's the same kind of problem. And I have an exception and a little thing they have to add to their spec. So we've got search built in to the developer portal. It's not great. I would love to have some kind of better search system. It's very, very basic, but it looks okay. Yes, Heather Mickman was our, oh boy, I'm going to say the wrong title, director. So yeah, this was Heather's baby, so to speak. This is a question about Heather Mickman, used to be a director at Target on her team, and this was kind of her domain. Alan asked about Swagger 3. We are using Swagger 3, or OpenAPI, sorry, bad J. We do allow OpenAPI 3, and once I get the Swagger editor updated, then I'm going to move to push everything to be 3 by default and try not to do any more 2. Okay, so that is the end of my talk. I don't know if we're allowed to plug that stuff, but I think you all know where to find jobs if you wanted to work at Target or not. I'm available for questions. I've been trying to keep up as we go. If I missed one, let me know. I don't know how much time. I think we're almost finished though. It was 1 minute. Got 1 minute for questions. Anything? All right. Well, thank you all for attending. Hopefully this was educational, or you learned something new, or maybe learned something you don't want to do. Like I said, I'm available for questions. I think all of my information is in my bio in the site here. So thank you. I'll see you in the other discussions.